Franklin sat perfectly still, but his eyes were trembling. You probably missed it the first time like everyone else. The way he leaned forward during that storm, how he muttered under his breath when the power flickered, how his shadow didn't move with him when he stood. It wasn't the thunder that made the lights buzz that night. It was something beneath the house, something that had been there longer than the floorboards, older than the dirt beneath them, older even than the idea of fear itself. I shouldn't be telling you this, but you're already here, already watching. And once you've heard what Franklin heard, you can't unhear it. You're not just a viewer now. You're a witness. This story isn't a story, it's a file, an unmarked, misfiled reel left behind by someone who wanted it forgotten. And you've just played it. It started with a whisper. Franklin's wife, Elise, had been asleep for hours when he came into the nursery and found the baby staring straight at the old cassette player. The player hadn't worked in years. They kept it because Elise said it reminded her of her father's voice. She could still hear it sometimes in her dreams. But tonight, the red recording light blinked. The tape was turning, and from inside the hiss and warble, they heard a voice that hadn't spoken in nearly 2 decades. It was Elise's. Father, all right, clear as breath, except he was speaking in a tone Elise had never heard. Panicked, rushed, as if warning someone, as if time was running out. And the baby, barely 10 months old, turned to Franklin, smiled, and said a name, one neither of them had ever spoken. Adam. Franklin dropped the baby monitor. No one in the family had ever been named Adam. They didn't know any Adams. And the sound that came out of the cassette next wasn't a voice. It was breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing like lungs fighting through time itself. Franklin tore the batteries out, but the tape kept spinning. That's when the lights went out. That's when the baby stopped blinking. That's when Elise screamed, "You're still watching. Good. Because no one else is seeing this, and I need you to remember every frame." The police never found Franklin's body, just his shoes, neatly placed by the crib, and a smear of dust shaped like 2 fingers pressed against the inside of the nursery window. Elise doesn't talk anymore. The baby hasn't aged. And last week, someone left a package on Elise's porch. No postage, no name. Just a single black VHS tape and a note that read, "He is awake now. Don't call him Frankenstein. He hates that name." And the tape, it ends with a question. A single quiet voice whispering to the camera. What happens to a soul when the body is borrowed? Roll static, cut to black, fade and faint whisper. "He's looking for you now." Franklin sat perfectly still, but his eyes were trembling. You probably missed it the first time like everyone else. The way he leaned forward during that storm, how he muttered under his breath when the power flickered, how his shadow didn't move with him when he stood. It wasn't the thunder that made the lights buzz that night. It was something beneath the house, something that had been there longer than the floorboards, older than the dirt beneath them, older even than the idea of fear itself. I shouldn't be telling you this, but you're already here, already watching. And once you've heard what Franklin heard, you can't unhear it. You're not just a viewer now. You're a witness. This story isn't a story, it's a file, an unmarked, misfiled reel left behind by someone who wanted it forgotten. And you've just played it. It started with a whisper. Franklin's wife, Elise, had been asleep for hours when he came into the nursery and found the baby staring straight at the old cassette player. The player hadn't worked in years. They kept it because Elise said it reminded her of her father's voice. She could still hear it sometimes in her dreams. But tonight, the red recording light blinked. The tape was turning, and from inside the hiss and warble, they heard a voice that hadn't spoken in nearly 2 decades. It was Elise's. Father, all right, clear as breath, except he was speaking in a tone Elise had never heard. Panicked, rushed, as if warning someone, as if time was running out. And the baby, barely 10 months old, turned to Franklin, smiled, and said a name, one neither of them had ever spoken. Adam. Franklin dropped the baby monitor. No one in the family had ever been named Adam. They didn't know any Adams. And the sound that came out of the cassette next wasn't a voice, it was breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing like lungs fighting through time itself. Franklin tore the batteries out, but the tape kept spinning. That's when the lights went out. That's when the baby stopped blinking. That's when Elise screamed, "You're still watching? Good. Because no one else is seeing this, and I need you to remember every frame." The police never found Franklin's body. Just his shoes neatly placed by the crib, and a smear of dust shaped like two fingers pressed against the inside of the nursery window. Elise doesn't talk anymore. The baby hasn't aged. And last week, someone left a package on Elise's porch. No postage, no name. Just a single black VHS tape and a note that read, "He is awake now, don't call him Frankenstein. He hates that name." And the tape? It ends with a question. A single quiet voice whispering to the camera. What happens to a soul when the body is borrowed? Roll static, cut to black, fade in faint whisper. He's looking for you now. The box in the crawl space wasn't supposed to be there. Elise had searched it a dozen times. On the third night after the mirror camera. On the seventh when Franklin's voice came through the baby monitor. Even once before that. Back when she was still pretending this was grief and not something else. But the box hadn't been there. Now it was. Duct-taped and dust-covered, with her own name scrawled across the lid in permanent marker. Not in her handwriting, but with her hand. She recognized the way her wrist dipped, the unconscious leftward slant of the capital E, the hollow loop of the lowercase s, like it had been drawn by someone guessing how to be Elise rather than remembering it. Inside were files, not photos, not letters. Patient intake reports. From Green Pines Sanitarium, her name stamped at the top. Diagnosis: acoustic delusional psychosis, trauma-linked mnemonic loops, persistent audio-visual hallucination. Her admission date: March 11, 2009. The same date whispered by the child in the video. The same date that had haunted her like a song you couldn't place but were sure had once been yours. The same date she couldn't remember anything about. And taped to the back of one file was a flash drive. She stared at it for an hour before plugging it in. And when she did, it auto-played a video. No file name, no metadata. Just grainy footage from what looked like a hospital interview room. In the frame, Elise, gaunt, pale, staring directly into the camera. I was wrong. The video Elise whispered. I thought it was memory, but it's not. It's not even time, it's location. Sound traps, places that record emotion. You think you're remembering? You're not. You're being remembered. That's why we can't escape it. That's why it knows. The video cut out mid-sentence. For a moment, Elise couldn't breathe. Not from fear, not even from confusion, but from a cold certainty, an instinct so primal it had no words. She'd felt this before. She'd said those words before. Somewhere deep in the hollow spaces of herself where time doesn't live linearly. The files weren't proof she was insane. They were proof someone had made her believe she was. And that's when the messages started again, slips of paper tucked under her pillow. Texts from blocked numbers that vanished after opening. Phrases that were unfinished like sentences begun in dreams. The echo isn't what we brought back. You should have left the door closed. Each message more frantic than the last. Each one ending in a name she'd begun to forget. David. It sent her back to the basement, back to the locked cabinet Franklin always told her was just old junk from his research years. The key had been hidden in the garage, in a floorboard beneath a rusted battery. She found it by accident, or maybe, finally, as if she had already searched for it before and forgotten. The cabinet creaked open like something unsealing, and inside were photos. David, not Franklin. Elise with David. Elise pregnant. Elise in a hospital bed. Elise holding a newborn she didn't recognize. But that was Franklin, wasn't it? The child in the photos looked identical to hers now. Same eyes, same scar under the left nostril, same glassy stare that made her feel like she was being looked through instead of at. But the photos were dated 10 years ago. The baby, this same baby, was born in 2015. That's impossible. Her child is barely 2. Franklin only entered her life 3 years ago. The math is wrong. The story is wrong. She dug deeper. More files, more recordings. And then she found it. The supposed origin. A schematic. A blueprint scrawled by hand. Labeled Audio Anchoring Field, Prototype TR3. It was dated March 10th, 2009. That's when she let herself believe she had it figured out. That the mystery was closed. That she had been part of an experiment in trauma recovery using spatial acoustics. That Franklin, maybe David, was a partner or subject in the project. That the baby was somehow a psychic imprint, a memory brought to life by places imbued with grief and longing and pain. She even began drafting a letter to the authorities, with names, dates, timelines. She called Jonah and told him she understood, that they were victims of a scientific betrayal, nothing more. That trauma could be weaponized and built into reality if the right signals were applied in the right place. It all made sense. Until she noticed one line in the blueprint, written not in pen, but carved deeply into the paper's fibers. Almost. Invisible unless angled under the light. If this worked, we'd never know. And that's when it hit her. The unease. The feeling not of something being wrong, but of something being deliberately misremembered. She stared back at the photos. Were those really her eyes? The scar on her temple, when did she get that? Her hands trembled. She looked down and noticed the mole near her left thumb was gone. A birthmark she'd always had. Hadn't she? She ran to the mirror. Her reflection blinked late again. A fraction of a second too long. As if it needed more time to catch up. She reached toward the glass, and for the first time, it reached back slightly faster. That night, the sky outside her house changed. There were no stars, no clouds, just a blackness that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Jonah called again. Panicked this time, voice clipped and scrambled. They're watching, not the government, not a group. The place itself. I saw the logs, Elise. You never left Green Pines. Not really. They built a shell for you, an echo chamber. It's still running, that's why you're looping. That's why nothing ever... The line cut, replaced by static, and through it came a voice she hadn't heard since she was a child. Her mother, whispering. A lullaby Elise didn't remember learning, but her mouth remembered the words. And then came the flood, memories not of her adult life, but of a girl. A different Elise, one who was institutionalized at 8 years old for claiming she could hear people's thoughts if she stood on certain floor tiles. One who disappeared for 2 years and returned with no record of where she'd been. One who always drew spirals on every surface, claiming they helped her remember which Elise was real. The past wasn't mirroring now, it was repeating. The disturbing event that mirrored the present wasn't one Elise remembered. It was one she had caused. The first child, the first signal breach. A baby that disappeared from Green Pines. Infant psychiatric wing in 2009. A male child named Franklin. Born to a patient named Elise Marin. A file sealed under federal order. She looked again at the man she had called her husband. His ID photo. His smile. The way he sometimes paused before answering like he was translating something. The way he'd said, "This time will be different" on the night the baby first spoke. And just like that, the false resolution shattered. Because this wasn't a story about grief, or trauma, or science. This was a story about a place. About a system that learned. That used memory as currency and identity as a recording medium. And every time Elise tried to resolve the story used her to begin again. She opened the laptop and saw something new. A video she didn't download, titled, "You're Not Crazy, They Lied to You, Hidden Truth Compilation." She hit play, it was her again. From earlier, from now, from years ago. And every time she said the same thing. Check the crawl space. The box was there again, unopened, taped shut. The label said, Chapter 1. And beneath that, rewatch required. They started appearing after 3 a.m. Messages Elise couldn't trace, couldn't explain, but somehow recognized. Not words at first. Symbols. A circle with a single vertical slash, drawn into the fog of her bathroom mirror, carved lightly into the wall beside her son's crib, etched into the back of her arm beneath an old scar, rising like it had always been there, waiting to surface. The same mark showed up in the basement, burned into the cabinet she'd broken open in the last chapter. And when she found it in the oldest photo she owned, her birth photo, it wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a warning. It meant someone else had been here. She kept the mirror message untouched, and the next night more appeared beneath it. Jagged, wet strokes like they had been drawn from the inside of the glass. This time it said, "We're still here, but not for long." And at the very bottom, faint and half-faded, were initials. A.M. Elise didn't know anyone by those letters, not anymore. But her heart dropped like she did, and had just forgotten. The baby began laughing in his sleep, not gentle, but long, unblinking cackles that didn't belong to him, and he began whispering names. First Jonah, then Franklin, then ones she hadn't spoken aloud in years, Marla, Casey, Liam, all people she remembered only in passing. Like strangers glimpsed on a bus ride she couldn't confirm ever happened. She stayed awake all night and watched the monitor, and at 4:16 a.m., the screen fuzzed out and cut to footage she hadn't recorded. It looked like an underground room. Cement walls, rusted bed frames, the circle/slash symbol painted on every surface, and in the center, a woman hunched over, speaking directly to the camera. "They're not memories," the woman said. "They're scripts, rehearsed too many times. We're trapped in someone else's story," Elise screamed. Not from fear, but from recognition. The woman in the video was her. Or rather, someone shaped like her. Same face, same voice, but her eyes were wrong, hollow, like they'd seen the ending too many times and given up pretending they hadn't. In the morning, she received a voicemail from a number labeled Unlisted Archive. It played a conversation she'd never had. "Elise, they know you're awake now. You were supposed to stay dormant until the loop reset." She deleted it. It reappeared 3 times, each version with different inflection, like someone running lines in a play they no longer believed in. That day, 3 strangers followed her. A woman in a white coat who vanished when Elise turned around. A man in a gray hoodie who mouthed, "Remember 1997," and stepped off the curb into nothing. And a child holding a mirror shard instead of a phone, reflecting Elise's face but much older, scarred, with no eyes. It all cracked wide open when she went to the library following the name A.M. She didn't know what she expected, an obituary maybe. Instead, she found a book tucked into the local record shelf, one that didn't belong there. It had no title, just the symbol on the cover. Inside, hundreds of names, all first-person entries, all describing the same exact symptoms she'd been experiencing. Missing time, duplicated footage, shared dreams, waking up in rooms that didn't exist, children who spoke languages they'd never been taught, a girl in Arizona who claimed her house rearranged itself at night, a soldier in Maine who couldn't remember which war he'd fought in, a teacher in Nevada who found her own body buried under the gymnasium, and every entry ended the same way. "You were right all along. It's not just you." Buried between pages 44 and 45, Elise found a small envelope with a Polaroid inside. Her and 5 others, all standing in front of the same underground room from the monitor footage, her arm around the woman from the screen. Jonah was there too, but behind them in the dark, someone else, faceless, watching, holding a clipboard. On the back, Group C, Cycle 19, found footage from 20 years ago. Elise dropped the book. It landed open on a page titled Observer Notes, and the voice in her head changed. A third presence, flat, clinical, curious but indifferent, watching but not guiding. It said, "They always break around this. Time. 48 hours post-loop breach. Identity collapse triggers fragment reformation. She's ahead of the curve. Recommend manual reset unless she finds the code." The words weren't on the page. She just knew them because the observer wasn't writing to anyone else. He was speaking directly to the viewer. You've seen the symbols, the circle, with the line. You thought it was just a detail, a stylistic choice. But it's been in every video, every angle. Reflected in pupils, scratched onto door frames, scrawled into the dirt under her shoes. You thought it was a set dressing mistake. It wasn't, it was a key. Look back, look closely. The timestamps glitch for a fraction of a second every time Elise gets close to the truth. Audio cuts that form incomplete words. Sta, rec, pla. Not random, not broken. They're functions. Playback, record, stop, reset. Someone has been editing this story live, and now the cracks are too wide to patch. Jonah returns. He looks older now, but not in years, in lives. His hands shake when he touches the doorknob to Elise's apartment, and when she opens, he backs away like her face has teeth. "You weren't supposed to remember me," he says. "That means we're in collapse phase. The other ones will come soon, they always do when a cycle fails." She drags him inside. He shows her his arms, covered in identical scars, symbols carved into flesh, not self-harm. Reminders. They wipe us every time, but pain echoes deeper than memory. That's why they haven't caught me yet. He opens a bag and dumps it out. Cassettes, VHS, flash drives, crumpled journals, all marked with dates from before Elise was born, and one with a label that makes her skin ice over. Cycle 1, original rejection. She plays it. The footage is grainy, raw, a small room. Elise again, but as a child, screaming, clawing at the wall, repeating one phrase, "I'm not the copy, I'm not the copy, I'm not..." The video cuts. Jonah doesn't explain. He doesn't have to. Because the phrase sounds like something you've heard before. Not on this channel, not in this story. Somewhere else. A dream. A note you wrote years ago and never mailed. A memory that doesn't feel like yours, but makes you cry anyway. And now, in the story, the news reports begin. But only at 3:11 a.m. Only on channel 17. Only in the left speaker. Low enough that you might ignore it. Reports of mass confusion. People claiming their loved ones aren't who they say they are. Shared dreams. Murals painted by children they couldn't explain. The circle symbol drawn in ash in schools across the country. One anchor whispers, "What the government never released, what they never wanted us to remember, is happening again." And just like that, the third perspective becomes impossible to ignore. He speaks directly into the sound design, below the music, beneath the static. A voice that says, "You are not Elise, you are the observer. You always have been. This was never her story, it was yours. She's the recording, you're the subject. That's why the symbols react to you. That's why you've always known how this ends. You chose to forget." And in the final frame of this chapter, the camera pans. Out of her house, out of her street, up through clouds and static, into an empty control room. 6 screens, 5 are black. One shows you, watching. Mouth slightly open, eyes wide. The symbol slowly flickering behind. You as if it was always there. And then, finally, loop reset optional. Awaiting viewer confirmation. Input. Then silence, open, still breathing. You were right all along. The room was silent, not empty, not dark, but hollow in that way a place becomes when memory and reality begin to peel apart. Elise sat in the center, legs pulled tight to her chest, her face caught between fury and surrender. Around her, the walls had begun to breathe. Subtle, quiet expansions and contractions like the building itself was remembering how to be alive. The symbol pulsed faintly under the floorboards, bleeding upward through the grains in the wood, casting soft circles of light on her arms and neck. It didn't frighten her anymore. It felt Familiar. The footage she'd uncovered, Jonah's tapes, the observer's whispers, the glimpses of herself across failed cycles, none of it gave her closure. If anything, it had split her apart in ways language couldn't reach. She wasn't sure which version of herself had lived what. She didn't know which memories were hers and which had been assigned. But in that stillness, she began to understand something deeper. The real mystery was never about what had happened. It was about why. Why would someone build a loop of half memories and shadow lives? Why copy people and erase their pasts only to let them remember too late? Why keep the pain alive in such precise patterns? Why her? And then came the thought she couldn't shake. What if it wasn't done to her? What if it was built for her? Jonah had been quiet for over an hour. When he finally spoke, it was through tears, and Elise barely recognized him. Eyes sunken, voice hollow with the weight of something he had carried too long. "I wasn't trying to help you," he said. "Not at first. I was trying to wake myself up. I thought if I could get you to see the loop, if I could get you to say my name, maybe I'd remember who I used to be." He sat beside her, knees brushing hers, hands trembling. "I think I was someone else once. Not Jonah, not this, but I can't go back there. I've seen too much now, and the worst part is, I don't even want to go back. I want to know how it ends." Elise stared at him, and for a moment she didn't hate him. She just saw herself, twisted backward through every truth she'd clung to, stripped bare by the realization that none of it, had ever been built to last. Everything was a test. Every connection, every love, every memory of her child, her home, her name, all of it designed to see what she would hold on to and what she'd be willing to let go. That's when the room changed. Not visibly, not violently, but with the soft, terrifying shift of understanding. She didn't remember walking into this room. She didn't know how long she'd been here. And worse, she didn't remember if this place ever existed before today. The walls now held faces, shadows etched into plaster, like silhouettes burned in by grief. Some looked like people she knew. Others looked like her. All of them wore the same expression, pleading and empty. Silent mouths repeating the same phrase she could now hear echoing from inside herself. "We did this because we couldn't live with the truth." And just like that, Elise remembered the first day she ever wanted to forget. She was 15. Her mother's accident had left nothing but fragments. No body, no funeral. Just a hospital room with a bed that stayed cold. Her mother's voice kept replaying in her head for months, until it didn't. Until even that was gone. And that was when Elise first imagined a version of herself who never had to remember anything painful. A version who woke up clean every time. Who never lost anyone. Who never felt the cut of grief deep enough to leave a scar. That's when the loops began. Not by machines. Not by government orders. By Elise herself. She built the first loop. A mental cocoon wrapped around her worst moment. And when it worked, when she could go a day without crying, she did it again and again, until the lie became real. That's why she recognized the faces. That's why the observer's voice felt like something she'd heard in dreams. She was the observer once. The subject, the architect, the victim, all of it. And now, she had to choose. Jonah reached out his hand. The control panel flickered to life in the wall. 3 commands glowed. Reset, awaken, forget. Each one humming like a living pulse beneath her fingertips. Each one a door that could never be unopened. Jonah whispered, "We can stay here, you and me. The pain never has. To come back, we can loop again, just long enough to forget we chose to." She turned to him. And the people outside the loop? His silence was the answer. In that moment, Elise felt everything at once. Love, loss, shame, rage, wonder, and a grief so vast it felt like the ocean itself had emptied into her lungs. She saw her son's face in the fog. Not the real one. The one she'd let exist only in fragments. She remembered his first cry and his last words before she looped again. "Don't go." The truth, she finally understood, wasn't just what had happened. It was what she'd run from, what she'd chosen not to carry. And now that she could remember, she couldn't hide from it again. She pressed her palm to the panel, but not the reset, not the forget. Her fingers hovered over awaken, and she said, "If I remember all of it, if I let it destroy me, maybe it can't control me anymore." The panel accepted her touch, and the walls began to vanish. One by one, the shadows dissolved into light. The room melted into static. The floor crumbled beneath her, but she didn't fall. She rose. And as she ascended, the dream unspooled behind. Her every frame of the story reversing, fragmenting, showing new angles you hadn't seen before. Elise's eyes locked with yours, and she spoke to you. You were never just watching, you were remembering. The final moment came not with a scream, not with a revelation, but with stillness, and a single line whispered into the dark as the screen faded to black. If the truth sets you free, why does it feel like dying? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.